Bridge to all decks. Welcome to a very, very special supplemental edition of Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. I am Steve Morris.
And I am Scott Mantz. And Steve, great job with that intro. My goodness.
Well, all I had to do was channel my internal Scott Mantz, and then it all just flowed out of me. And I am super excited because you just sent me an audio file that I got to listen to that was so special. And I am thrilled that we get to share it with our audience. Scott, do you want to tell us what this is?
Well, this is very, very special indeed. And I'm so excited that we get to share it on our Enterprise Incidents podcast because I was, doing consulting with the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles for their Star Trek exhibition titled Exploring New Worlds. So one of the programs that I got to set up for them was a 30th anniversary screening of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, followed by a Q&A that I moderated with director Nicholas Meyer, producer Steven-Charles Jaffe, and composer Cliff Eidelman. And the great thing about this, Steve, well, a few great things. One of them being that Nicholas Meyer, of course, he gets asked all the time about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, which is still the greatest Star Trek movie of them all. It is the Citizen Kane of Star Trek movies. And our episode on the Cinephiles on the Wrath of Khan is the Citizen Kane of Cinephiles episodes, other than your episode on Citizen Kane. But no one ever asked him about Star Trek VI. He never gets to do anything for Star Trek VI. And of course, we have our two-part episode on the Cinephiles for Star Trek VI. So I was able to have our conversation recorded so that we can now share it with our friends and our listeners who have been supporting Enterprise Incidents since the beginning.
What's so great listening to it, and the first thing, I don't know how many people out there know this, but you are pretty much a professional Q&A person. This is a thing that you do all the time, and you're so damn good at it. Like, that's what's so cool to listen to it. Yeah, I mean, well, part of it is, of course, you have deep, deep love for Star Trek and deep knowledge about it, so you knew the right questions to ask.
Well, listen, I definitely love moderating. I've been doing the sort of moderating, hosting like live Q&As and conversations for about 30 years. So to be able to do a conversation like this for not only a Star Trek movie, but a Star Trek movie that doesn't really get the love and attention that it really, really deserves. And the 30th anniversary of Star Trek VI, Steve, I felt like December 6th, 2021, which was the 30th anniversary of Star Trek VI, just kind of came and went. Nobody really marked the occasion with anything. So to be able to mark the occasion here on Enterprise Incidents with this conversation, I feel really lucky that we're able to do this.
I'll tell you the thing that I like so much listening to this is sometimes you can tell when people are answering questions like this that they've answered the question over and over again, and they're just kind of getting through it. These guys are having so much fun. They're really excited to be there.
Yeah, I'm glad that really came through, Steve, because it definitely felt that way while doing the conversation, and everybody in the audience afterwards, and certainly the administrators at the Skirball Cultural Center came up to me and said, "Wow, that was really a lot of fun. Those guys were having a great time. They had a lot of chemistry, a lot of great stories." So really, I'm so glad that came through to you as well. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, Enterprise Incidents fans, here is my conversation with Nicholas Meyer, Steven-Charles Jaffe, and Cliff Eidelman on Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. Enjoy. Hey, everybody. First of all, I got to say, it is so great to see a theater full of people. Welcome back. And, I just got to say that if Dr. McCoy was around during the pandemic, he would have had a cure for that in about 18 hours. So very, very excited for tonight's conversation for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, which had its opening night on December 6, 1991. So this is the 30th anniversary plus 2 months of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. So let's hear it for Star Trek VI. And at the bookstore here at the Skirball, Nicholas Meyer, the director of Star Trek VI, has a brand new novel out called The Return of the Pharaoh. It's brand new, and it is on sale right now at this Skirball bookstore, actually right outside here, outside this theater. So make sure you pick this up. It's brand new, hot off the presses. Also, how many of you were at our Star Trek marathon back in November, by show of hands? Well, we are doing another one this weekend. This weekend in this very theater, Saturday and Sunday, we are screening The Cage, Where No Man Has Gone Before, Mirror, Mirror, Best of Both Worlds, 1 on Saturday, and then Sunday morning we're screening part 2, because you got to have a cliffhanger. And we're also going to screen Rejoin from Deep Space Nine and The Inner Light from Next Generation. Terry Farrell will be here, and Sonequa Martin Green for an episode of Discovery. Michelle Hurd for an episode of Picard. So we are starting with The Cage and ending with Discovery and Picard on Sunday. So we are going through 55-plus years of Star Trek in one weekend. So please join us here this weekend. And make the marathon is still on sale. The exhibition is sold out. So please come this weekend and tell your friends. Also, if you haven't already done so, please listen to my podcast, my Star Trek podcast, my weekly deep dive on the original series. It is called Enterprise Incidents with Scott and Steve. So make sure you listen to that. And very, very excited here now to join us on stage. Please welcome the composer for Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Cliff Eidelman. Please welcome the producer of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Steven-Charles Jaffe. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the director of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, Nicholas Meyer. And just before we get into the conversation about Star Trek VI, I just want to alert you all that tomorrow is a very special anniversary, because 55 years ago tomorrow, broadcast on TV for the very, very first time, 55 years ago tomorrow, was Space Seed. So there you go. All right, but let's get into Star Trek VI. There was, for a long time, it just didn't seem like Star Trek VI was going to happen. And then it happened. So I want to start with you, Stephen. How did it happen?
I can't tell you how it happened. I can tell you what happened before it happened. Nick and I were in Berlin when the wall came down.
We were not responsible.
We tried, though. And believe it or not, there was the most insane, passionate sense of euphoria there, and we thought around the world. Evil was over. There was nothing bad that could happen again. Can you believe we actually thought that? And there were a lot of spies from the East running to us saying, we'll do anything on your show to be technical advisors because we're out of a job. We're not going to be spies anymore. Anyway, we made a movie there which didn't work out for all kinds of weird reasons. And cut to, the movie's done. It's not getting a proper release. Nick and I are in London, and we're licking our wounds. We're actually drinking our wounds. There's a table with a bottle of scotch between us, and we're just pouring it down. And the phone rings. Nick answers it, and it's Leonard Nimoy. And I recall, although I will say, I was as inebriated as my partner was. So take what I say truthfully, but with a grain of salt. I think Leonard had 2 words, "How are you, Nick?" Something about Star Trek, and Nick hung up. And I said, "Who was that?" And he said, "Well, that's Leonard." The phone rings again, and he gets more out. I've got an idea about Star Trek where the wall comes down in outer space. The Klingons are the Russians, et cetera, et cetera. I think there was a second hang-up. And then we talked about it, and oddly enough, I had one lucid moment for me, which is kind of unusual. I realized that what Leonard was proposing had a relevance to the movie that we just made and we were crying over. And how many times do you get a chance to sort of make the same movie twice, but in a way that people will see it? Because I knew whatever we did, Star Trek would be seen, unlike what we just did. I think that was the story, because we then went and tried to make it. And then all kinds of shenanigans happened at the studio, how much it would cost and unrealistic things, but we still got to make the movie.
So obviously Star Trek II was a big hit, and it was also a big hit. But it was also the Star Trek movie that we really wanted, we really needed. And then in 1991, Star Trek VI was the Star Trek movie we really wanted after Star Trek V, and we really needed, because this was the 25th anniversary of Star Trek. This was going to be the last movie with the entire cast from the original series. So Nick, what made you say, I'm coming back and I'm directing this movie?
Well, I should preface my remarks by simply saying that my memory is imperfect. I think I have a good memory, but I've been told on occasion that it was in error. For example, people said to me, "Did you have a lot of interaction with Gene Roddenberry?" And I said, "Well, I met him on the Wrath of Khan. We sort of shook hands, but I don't, I didn't see a lot of him." And then I was back at the University of Iowa, which is my alma mater, and they showed me an exhibition of my papers, which contained lengthy memoranda between me and Gene Roddenberry about the Wrath of Khan, all of which I'd blocked, rather I didn't remember. So my memory of how Six came about is a little different than Steve. I don't remember, possibly because I was as drunk as he says I was, anything about that night. What I do remember was being taken to lunch by Martin Davis and Frank Mancuso at Claridge's and saying, we don't want to go out with five. We want another Star Trek movie. Do you have any ideas? And typical me, I said, no. And the next thing I knew, I was on Cape Cod for my little 2-week holiday, and Leonard Nimoy flew in he's from Boston, and it's a 10-minute flight, and he flew in, and we walked up and down the beach, and he said, "What about the wall coming down in outer space?" Who am I if I have no enemy to define me? And it doesn't take much to prime my pump. It just needs a little something. And I said, "Oh yeah, we start with an intergalactic Chernobyl, and I'm not going to spiel what you all know, and some of you hopefully do not, because you haven't seen the movie. But I basically walked up and down the beach and came up with that idea. And at this Claridge's luncheon, they said, "You have $30 million to make the movie." And I said, "Okay, all right, okay." And then after I showed up in California, and I had rented a place in Beverly Hills for 6 months. I brought my wife, I brought my 2 daughters, and it was the first day in the studio, and we're all talking about how excited we are. And Mr. Mancuso was not in the room at this time, and somebody said, "Now we're talking about $25 million," and I said, "Ho, whoa!" And I said, no, we're not. We're talking 30. 30 is that's the same price as 5, but, you're not going to get any more. You've got $14 million above the line. You've got $2 million in special effects. You have 4.5, whatever it was. I said, that's $18 million. Where's the movie? And I'm not making this up. And they said, "Will you excuse us for just a minute?" And they went into another room. And Leonard and Steve and I and Ralph Winter sat there. And then they came back and they said, $27.5. And I said, "You're laboring under a misapprehension. I'm not negotiating. I'm giving you information." And and I'm dyslexic with numbers, and I resent the fact that I'm being in the position of doing the math for you. And the hell with this. I'm going to talk with Frank Mancuso. I'm going to explain it to him. I'm going to take him through it. And I knew what had happened. Their feature division had lost a lot of money in the previous 6 months since that luncheon. And now they were, So I went to see Mr. Mancuso, who heard me out very courteously. I laid out all the facts and figures and everything. And he canceled the movie.
How did you get it back?
I had a 6-month lease on a house in Beverly Hills. And you know those scenes in movies where people have a box in their office and they're putting things in the box, they're putting the things in the box, and thinking, I don't want to tell my wife this on the phone. And I thought, well, I'll take one last walk around the lot, just sentimental. And I'm walking on some soundstage that was to have been ours, doing something. And in those days, before there were cell phones, there was a phone that stood on a stand in the soundstage, and it had a little light that would go on when it was ringing, so it didn't disturb, during a take. And there's nobody there, and this phone starts lighting up. And I say, hello?
You answered the phone?
Well, I didn't know. Ask not for whom the bell tolls.
Was it for you?
Yeah, it was for me. It said, hi. I said, hello. He said, Nick, it's Stanley Jaffe. Sherry and I are running the studio. I hear you need money. And I said, or he said, I hear you have problems. I said, I need $5 million. And he said, you got it. And the movie was back on.
Just like that.
Like that.
That is Hollywood, baby. So after the 5 prior films you had composed, obviously, look, Jerry Goldsmith's score for the motion picture is one of the best music scores for a motion picture, any motion picture. And Horner's the 2 he did for track 2 and track 3, and you have Leonard Rosenman doing the score for track 4, and then back to Goldsmith for track 5. Cliff, how did track 6 come about for you, and why was it such a breakthrough for you to score and compose track 6?
Well, all I can say is, thank God they had money problems, because I wouldn't be sitting here today if they didn't. Seriously, that opened the door up for a newcomer like me. And so I submitted tapes like other composers did. And I actually didn't know this until I was having dinner at Nick's house maybe a few, 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't really know that a tape of mine of previous scores had been given to Nick as well as to Ron Roos, who is Nick's great friend from childhood and the editor of the film, and they each had a batch of tapes. But my understanding is they came together, with the same tape in hand, which was my tape, and I think that opened the door up to me being able to come through. The combination of not having the budget for Jerry Goldsmith and
we didn't have a budget for James Horner either.
And so I'm sitting here today.
Well, I'm sure everyone in this room shares the sentiment, saying we are lucky to have you here because the score is fantastic.
Thank you.
I decided that I was, ever since John Williams and the Star Wars music, these sort of Korngold-esque Richard Strauss sort of rum-ti-tum marches, I said, this should be different. This should be a curveball. This is about a mysterious, brooding, sort of unknown culture. And we should start differently. And I said to Cliff, you know the opening of Firebird? And he said, I sure do. I said, like that.
Wow. Well, I'm going to come back to that. So 1990, 1991. So I never thought this would be possible. Like when I was growing up and I was watching TOS, the original series, in the 70s, I'm part of the syndication generation. And I'm proud of that because that's what made Star Trek popular. And growing up in the 80s with the movies, I never thought in a million years that another Star Trek show would actually be more popular than the original series. But that is what happened with the Next Generation. And that was the peak time for Next Gen. So, Steven, what was it like filming on the lot when you've got people running around the Next Generation uniforms and you got your people running around in your uniforms?
I will say one big benefit of the TV show being there on the lot, and no one in this audience will probably believe it, but the scene where Kirk fights himself, which you could do on your home computer, maybe on your iPhone today. ILM was stumped, and someone said, you should talk to Rob Legato, who's the effects guy on the show. I said, I'll take anybody's advice. Sorry. That's why we're partners. And Rob comes over, and he looks at what we have to do, and in very simple English for anyone to understand, he tells us how to shoot it. And the rest is history. It's in the movie. But Rob Legato never forgot that we initiated him to feature films on Star Trek VI. And he went on to make Avatar, Jungle Book, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. What were we going to say about?
I was going to say that the two of the most memorable scenes in this movie, and unlike Steve, I'm not going to give you spoilers, were directed by this man. Just bear in mind. You'll know them when you see them.
Well, Cliff. So talking about like the opening credits. So like all the other Star Trek movies, they have this real big, optimistic, real theatrical kind of score, and Star Trek VI is like you point out, it's very like ominous, like not utopian, really setting the stage for the tone of what Star Trek VI is going to be. Like how did the planets really serve as inspiration for you for the entire score?
It wasn't the planets. It started with the planets. We'll get to you. When I couldn't afford Jerry Goldsmith and I couldn't afford James Horner, I thought, what about Gustav Holst? What about the planets? And so all the lawyers from the Holst estate and all the reps from the Holst estate came to Paramount, and we took them on the set and we fawned over them, and because I thought it would be interesting to use the planets for a space movie. And then we found out that the Paramount lawyers wanted the rights to the planets of Gustav Holst in perpetuity for their grandchildren and forever. And that's the bread and butter of the Holst estate. So then we had to rethink. And that's when I started thinking about Firebird, and that's when Ron Roos and I discovered, he was not undiscovered, but he was our whatever.
I will say that when I met Nick on Time After Time, and he said, I want Miklos Rocha to score this movie, and I don't know that Miklos had made a movie in years, but I knew Nick's education and love for classical music, and I was not about to argue with him. He tracked down Miklos, he did the movie, it's a great score, and then Nick made him autograph every one of his scores, which I think is over 100.
It was 40.
Poor guy, almost died signing records. But what Nick did with Cliff and me was he didn't talk about money. He just said, listen to this. I think this is our guy. That's all. It wasn't about money. So there, take that.
So Cliff, what were the challenges for you to really make a score that felt very appropriate for this movie, but also not one that was going to be, sort of compared to the Goldsmith and the Horner and the...
Well, it's because of my first meeting with Nick that happened. Because I was in his office at Paramount, and I remember sitting across, and he was behind his desk, and he stood up and he said, as great as those previous Star Trek scores were, with all the trumpet fanfares and so forth, that's not this movie. It's something more brooding, something you don't see, something more mysterious. And then he said, like the opening of the Firebird. It's very dark and brooding. So that was my clue for stepping into, or having the permission to go and do something different. And so I felt completely comfortable. I knew all the previous scores, I loved them, but I didn't feel like I had to follow in their footsteps. And so I was given permission to try something like this.
Wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
I should add that when one of the things that intrigued me about Cliff was that, and stop me if I got this wrong, you did your senior thesis on Gustav Holst's The Planets. Your dissertation, was it?
Well, it was. I probably told you that, but.
whoa! All these years later, Nick.
No, but the truth is, I did actually study the planets a lot, and I did actually make a report on it. And I don't know about my senior dissertation, but it was a score that I studied and knew well. And so when I knew it was in consideration, and I thought at that point, well, maybe I'll just be arranging it. And so I thought, hey, that's, I should tell Nick how much I've studied the score, and that would give me a better chance to be able to be the arranger. But luckily, when they were having problems with the Holst estate and so forth, they came over and started hearing some themes that I was writing. I think Steven, I think you were in the room, and I think somebody, and we were in my little apartment, and then you and somebody, you may not remember this, I think somebody stood up and said, well, why are we trying to license the planets when we got these themes? And then that was the end of the planets. I mean, not the planet, the idea of trying to license the planets.
So,
Cliff, I don't think this is going to work.
all right. It worked. So I think that Kim Cattrall was fantastic as Valaris. She was just magnificent. But I think one of the big what ifs is, what if that was Savick? So Nick and Steven, I read your book, The View from the Bridge, and why didn't you have Savick be the traitor? What was the story behind that?
Well, I will say this quickly because I do think, we're like sitting on the runway here waiting to see the movie, for the plane to, whatever the analogy is. Absolutely wanted Savick to be the person in question. I'm resisting as hard as I can, the giveaways here. I don't know why we couldn't get Kirstie Alley. But again, sometimes you really get lucky. Because if you know who the first choice to play Norma Desmond was? Mae West.
Is that right?
Yeah. Wow. So we all got lucky. We got Kim Cattrall, and she was great.
She is great. Absolutely, she's great. So also, the other thing about this movie that was jarring back then, 30 years ago when I saw it for the first time, was just how bitter Kirk is. There were certainly episodes where Kirk realizes he made a mistake, like Aaron DeMercy or Arena, but to see him so bitter, let them die. Let them die. But so I wonder if you could talk about working with Shatner and the challenges on working with him on a role, playing Kirk in a way that he's never played him before.
Well, I think Mr. Shatner is very protective of Kirk. It was his persona. And artists are not the best judges of their own work, so I'm just giving you sort of what I think was going on. I was pushing in this movie for a very different version of human affairs. I think Gene Roddenberry believed, or said that he believed, in the perfectibility of human beings. in thousands of years of human history, I've seen no evidence of any progress. Well, there's one thing, we have buttons. We can push buttons and make things happen faster, but they're the same things. And in this movie, my vision of the crew and the captain of the Enterprise is that they were flawed. They were human beings. They shared their weaknesses. And I think it was something for Bill to get his head around, and it's to his credit that he went with it. With the line in question, which we will not repeat, because again, these are all giveaways, and we've done the free DVDs. He wanted to sort of somehow take it back what he said or make some exculpatory gesture, and I just cut it before he could do it, because I just needed it to be the way it was. Anyway.
It was the right call. It absolutely is the right call. Like, Stephen, I want to talk about just the mood on the set, because, I mean, everyone knew that they not only was this a film that was going to unite them one last time, but that they were given, like, a gift to go out on a higher note than the previous movie. What was the mood like on the set of this film?
Well, I can tell you at 3 a.m. in Bronson Canyon, Bill came up to Nick and I, and we were trying to get a couple of Z's before the next setup, and he said, I'm involved in this company called Expedia. You guys ought to get in on it.
Are you serious?
And we thought, yeah, right, Bill. So one time, or the second time, we should have listened to him.
You have all these memories that I don't have.
I was a newcomer. I got in on the coattails of my partner, and I was really honored. I was a huge Star Trek fan. I remember the last day, there was a shot of the entire original crew on the deck of the Enterprise, and I'm looking at these people, and thank you. And I had a flashback to me in my pajamas in Stamford, Connecticut, when it was a little hick town, watching these guys on TV, and all I'm thinking is, how the fuck did I get here?
Yeah.
And aren't I lucky? Yeah. And you know, I'm very proud of this movie, but I was so jealous that I didn't get to be a part of Wrath of Khan, which is, without a doubt, the Citizen Kane of Star Trek movies.
Yes, it is.
I'm quoting you.
That's all right.
Scott said
Thank
that.
you.
That was his friend.
Just a couple more questions. I just want to ask about the motif that you composed for the ending credits with the signatures, because it's beautiful.
Thank you. Well, it was towards the end of the composing process, and kind of like Steve, I remember seeing this original cast when I was just a little kid watching it on television, and now I thought to myself, and now I've got to somehow, in an emotional way, through music, sum up these characters, and how lucky am I to be able to do that? And to have, I mean, honestly, to work with Nick, who I think is honestly a genius, and you see it in his, and that word is thrown around. That word is thrown around a lot these days, but I really mean it. And also, he's a musician. I mean, his sister was in the violin section when we were recording it, as my wife Claire was in the bass section. She's sitting right there. She played the double bass. But all I could say was it was an honor and an inspiration, and I just. But I didn't feel the weight of it. I didn't feel stressed or anything like that, and that's really a testament to these guys. The people I was working with didn't make me feel that way, so I just went with it.
A couple more, last two questions. We got to talk, Nick. Christopher Plummer is the greatest Klingon ever. Don't wait for the translation. Answer me now. How awesome is Christopher Plummer? Like, wait a minute. How did you, like, How did you get, you wrote this role for him?
Yes, I wrote the role for Christopher Plummer. It's the only time, aside from a Star Trek cast, that I've ever written a role with one and only one actor in mind. I don't know how many of you own copies of the CD of Henry V, the Chandos CD, where he does several speeches from the play to the William Walton music. I used to lie awake in the dark and listen to this thing at piercing volume. He has a voice like a trumpet. And I wrote Chang for him. And a lot of people didn't want to work on Star Trek VI because they thought the series had sort of been played out. But we had a casting director, Mary Jo Slater, who really believed in it. And I said, listen, I know we don't have any money for this movie, but you have to bring me Chris Plummer, dead or alive, or there isn't a movie. And she really believed, and she came back, trotting with him like a bird dog, with a, and here he is. He was great fun to work with. It was great fun to work with.
Last question is, what is the legacy of Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country? Stephen.
Well, the easy answer is it's the last one with the original cast, and it's memorable for that among many other reasons. But I also think this whole notion that when we made it, we were thinking that the wall coming down in reality, the wall coming down in a movie, signified a change in everybody's attitude towards humanity, which has proven to be painfully wrong. And I think the fact that it's lingering there, that there was this hope from the symbolism of the wall coming down, that we're still looking for that. And yet, if you talk to people in spycraft, they will say, give me the Cold War any day. At least I know who my enemy is.
The irony, first I say this and then we're really going to stop. First of all, it's not for me to say what the legacy of this movie is. It's the artist loses all proprietary authority over their work when it's done. It's out there in the world. It's for everybody. It's for you to decide for yourselves what it is. The one thing I will say I have a lot more sympathy now for a certain group of characters in this movie now than I did when we made the movie, because I'm starting to think, well, maybe they had a point and we didn't, maybe we're not better off now. Maybe we would have been better off if their point had prevailed. It's just something that I find myself thinking about when I watch the movie. Anyway, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Cliff, Steven, Nick, thank you so much for being here for this conversation. Thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, once again, enjoy the movie Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, in a theater, on a big screen. Enjoy.